everyone, and welcome back to Plainest Pages. Today we're talking about To His Mistress Going to Bed by John Donne. This is another poem on the Edexcel A-level English literature curriculum, but as always, I hope that you might just be interested even if you're not doing the exam, so let's dive straight into the summary. This is an elegy. This is a form of poem which we usually associate with death. However, while Donne was writing this poem, an elegy didn't necessarily have to be used in that sense. It was just a reflection. So it's a reflective poem, and here he reflects on his beloved as he tries to seduce the woman, openly declaring that he wants her to take her clothes off and describing exactly how. And yes, you've heard that right. This is very much not a PG poem, so I don't quite know how it made it onto the curriculum, but it is on there, so we will be doing it on here as well. If you're uncomfortable, you have been warned. I did not choose this poem. As the poem progresses, the interesting thing is that there is actually a deeper progression, so it's not just about getting the woman to take off her clothes. There's also a deeper meaning in the sense that he wants to see who the woman truly is, and really, as he's the one left with the clothes on, we have to ask, is it really such a misogynistic poem? Because who really is in control here? The title, To His Mistress Going to Bed, seems to us different now, as mistress has come to acquire a sense of a woman you're having an affair with, but this is because the word has actually undergone a semantic shift. During Donne's time, it would have just meant the woman in control of the house. This poem is constructed in one long stanza, 48 lines, and it is continuous because Donne is putting forward a continuous idea of this prolonged seduction in which he tries to get the woman to agree and take her clothes off. This is likely one of those poems he would have read to his friends, probably an imaginary scenario, so he likely wouldn't have asked a woman to take off her clothes this way, and this is likely very much an intellectual exercise. It was not included in Donne's earlier collections, deemed too risque for obvious reasons, and it was only ever published later posthumously. The meter is iambic pentameter, the famous rhythm of love, so very much according to the style and content of the work, and the poem is entirely in rhyming couplets AA, BB, CC, which of course matches the way the speaker is trying to get the woman to be with him so that they can stay together. Come, madam, come, all rest my powers defy, until I labor, I in labor lie. So come here, come, my lady, to me, because all rest my powers defy. Powers is a reference to the male virility, so in other words, I cannot sleep for you because my desire for you is so strong. Until I labor, I in labor lie. I'm so energetic that I cannot rest until I work it off. Come seems very much commanding here. It's an imperative, but it also seems like he's not quite ordering her. Rather, it seems like an invitation, a bequest, and this repetition of the word come split apart by the word madam and the caesura of the commas is significant because it shows that he's thinking about her so much that she interferes in every sentence that he says, everywhere she is in his thoughts, and he cannot rest until he is with her together, the same way that the commas surround madam, the same way his thoughts surround this woman. Come could also be another double entendre, another pun, so the poem really is very naughty from the onset. Labor is an interesting choice of word here, labor I lie. It references back to effort, and really it was an unusual choice for a love act, so potentially this could be more apt to saying like the labors of poetry and the labors of my craft. So once again, Donne could potentially be leaving us like a hint that yes, this was for my friends, this was very much an intellectual exercise. It's very much the persona of a man engaged in such risque behaviors. I personally would never have done this myself. And this poem actually contains far fewer enjambments than all the other poems that we have seen so far. So I have split it according to each new idea, so let's move on to the next one. The foe of times, having the foe inside, is tired withstanding, though he never fight. So the enemy, a lot of times, seeing the enemy, gets tired from just standing up. He hasn't even seen battle yet, but he's already tired. The enemy, of course, is well, referring to the male organ here. It's a reference to the battle of the sexes. So it's almost like this image of a war with the woman being the ultimate battle because she's defying the man's conquest of herself. So the man is tired because he's just standing there, even though he hasn't seen the action, he's laboring, as was said in the previous stanza. So this style of poem is actually probably mocking the Blazon poem. So the Blazon poem was a style where every bit of the woman was described, like, oh, her cheeks are so rosy, her lips are so red, she is as pale as she's as pale as snow. So it was that kind of poetry, really romantic poetry that desperate lovers would write, completely obsessing over the woman of their dreams. And here Donne makes a mockery of that essentially because he describes every aspect of the woman and of himself in an incredibly naughty way. Off with that girdle, like heaven's zone glistering, but a fair, fairer world encompassing. We next get a series of imperatives. Off with that girdle, unpin, unlace. So the first description is of a girdle. A girdle is sort of like a belt, but it would have been not around like the waist as we have it now, but more so around the hips. So he's saying that it's like heaven's zone glistening. We have the simile that it's like a heaven zone, so like a large expanse of the sky with lots of stars, this brilliant, beautiful night sky. But guess what's prettier? This thing underneath is what Don's saying. So, yeah, sure, this glittering thing is prettier, but I know of a better glittering thing. This entire video is just me trying not to get demonetized right now. Removing certain works from the curriculum and claiming that they're not age appropriate, and then putting a poem like this on the curriculum is quite the interesting choice from the British Education Board, but okay. Your uterus shines brighter than the stars. It just gets more interesting the more you progress. Unpin that spangled breastplate which you wear, that the eyes of busy fools may be stopped there. So unpin the breastplate. This was kind of like a bodice or a corset, but the correct term was a stomacher. So it was kind of this bit that would cover like the breast area and also the stomach, and it really was like a breastplate because the whole point was to, well, not get perverts to stare at this area. So it's quite ironic that Don is saying like busy fools may be stopped there. Busy here is in the sense of like nosy fools, naughty fools. So those naughty, nosy people who have no business being with you. It's to, the breastplate is to stop them from looking at you. But then of course the irony is that, well, he is very much looking at her here. The semantic field of war, again linking back to this image of the war between the sexes, how the breastplate is like a piece of armor. So it's her armor, her defense against, well, men like him. So we can see that the more it progresses, the more we see that it really was like an intellectual argument on Don's part to kind of explore the very idea of what makes a romantic poem and what makes seduction a seduction, and, well, just popular themes of the time. And spangled, like star spangled, it again references back to the sky, so it's kind of this idea that she has a really shiny belt and a glittery stomacher. So the stomacher would have really been only taken off for a romantic partner, which is why he's kind of alluding to it and suggesting that she unpins it for him. Unlace yourself for that harmonious chime tells me from you that now it is bedtime. So this is another imperative, unlace yourself. So this would have likely been the side of the dress during this period rather than our idea of like corsets. And then he says, so now that you've taken off the front of the dress, get rid of the sides. And then he says, look at this harmonious chime. So we can picture that probably a clock goes off somewhere and he's saying, oh, you hear that clock? Well, it's telling us that it's time to go to bed. Bed, of course, in the sexual meaning of the word bed. Off with that happy busk which I envy, that still can be and still can stand so nigh. So off with that corset bit, the bit that's supporting your chest, the lingerie bit, off with that stands so nigh, which I envy it. So he personifies this, and he is basically saying that he's very jealous of this part because it's nigh, so nearby. So in other words, he's jealous of this part because it is very close to the woman's breasts, essentially. Your gown going off such beauteous state reveals, as when from flowery meads the hill's shadow steals. Okay, so then we have a break from the really dirty parts of the poem, and we have this pretty image of. He says that essentially, when you take the dress off, you have this pretty image that you're so beautiful. It's almost like there was a cloud covering the sun, shining on a meadow of flowers, and now the cloud has gone away, and the sun illuminates the flowers. So you're so pretty. You're this natural beauty, just like the flowers, just like the meadow. It's quite a romantic line, quite the temporary respite because it gets worse, a little bit worse from here. Off with that wiry coronet and show, the hairy diadem which on you doth grow. Now off with those shoes and then safely tread in this love's hallowed temple, this soft bed. So a coronet. A coronet is a sort of like a crown or a headband. So he's saying take off this like wiry diadem that you might like have on your head and show me another kind of hairy crown which grows on you. I think the euphemism is clear. So then he says, take off your shoes and safely tread in this love's hallowed temple, this soft bed. So he then alludes to religious imagery. The bed becomes like a place of worship, like a temple. We again have this idea of the world as a microcosm, that the lover's bed is like a small world for the lovers in which they live and are totally under control and live by their own rules. So the bed becomes a whole new place to create a world, which in this context especially makes sense because they can quite literally create life together. In such white robes heaven's angels used to be, received by men, thou angel bring'st with thee a heaven like Mohammed's paradise, and thou ill spirits walk in white, we easily know. By this these angels from an evil spite, those set our hairs, but these are flesh upright. License my roving hands and let them go, before, behind, between, above, below. So in such white robes, in other words, in the same white as the white of your sort of underclothes. So what women of the time would have worn was under their dress, they would have had kind of these white, probably shapeless bodices that they would wear underneath to kind of cover up a little bit more. So he's saying that it's the same white as the white that the angels would wear, and angels wear those same pure robes, those same pure colors. So he also avoids blasphemy. So he then makes use of a technique that a lot of other poets of the time would have done. Well, obviously, this is quite a risque topic to have a poem as provocative as this, and he's also alluding to religious imagery, which is, well, incredibly blasphemous, especially for values of the time, to have such a poem be even used on the same page as you're referencing angels and like worship. So to avoid blasphemy, what many poets would do is say, oh, we're not talking about the Christian religion or the Protestant religion or the Catholic religion, basically any religion that's major in England. We're talking about Islam. Yeah, it's not very respectful, I apologize. So essentially he's saying that the woman is like the dream that Muhammad the Prophet would have had. It's this idea of Islam as a religion where you can have many wives. So he's saying like, oh, by looking at the white of your underclothes, that reminds me of so many angels, you're like all of the other angels, so you would probably have a place in like Islamic paradise. We have to be aware and mindful because some angels are not really angels. They may be evil spirits who also wear white, and those set our hairs. So we can tell the evil spirits apart because they make our hairs stand up on their ends because they're terrifying. But we can definitely tell the good angels apart because they make our flesh upright. So they make something else stand on its ends. And then he says, license my roving hands and let them go, before, behind, between, above, below. So So it's basically a manual on intimacy, for lack of other words, and it's an asynthetic list of prepositions. But it's interesting to note here the use of license. He's very much asking for permission. Who is really in control here? I have to ask because, well, he's asking for consent quite a lot throughout. He's saying license. Like, yes, sure, he's trying to break her down and get her into bed with him, but ultimately she's very much the one in control, this unnamed woman. She doesn't even have to say anything, and still he's essentially begging. He's on his knees saying, please license, please let my hands do this. He's not just doing this to her. And as we'll see at the end, he's the one that remains in a vulnerable position. So this is certainly a fascinating poem to look at from the perspective of kind of gender roles and women's liberation. Oh, my America, my newfound land, my kingdom safeliest when with one man manned, my mine of precious stones, my empire, how blessed am I in thus discovering thee. So this exclamation, oh my America, my newfound land, it's very dramatic, it's frankly very amusing. Contextually, Donne's period in life would have been the period of discovery, at the height of its beginnings of colonial empire and its colonial empire in general. There were so many like explorers and sailors sailing abroad in search of new lands to colonize, in search of new goods to bring back home, in search of new experiences, new trades, new sciences. It references back to this. It makes a very relevant allusion to what have been new and exciting at the time. And he's saying that, well, for me, the most exciting in its quite literal sense is not this exploration of lands far gone, but the lands I have right there. She is my newfound land. She's my kingdom. She's my everything. Safeliest when with one man manned. There were all sorts of myths and rumors going on around that a new woman who sleeps before marriage is dangerous, that it may end in terrible consequences for you and for your body if you were a man sleeping with such a woman. And so he's saying safeliest when with one man, so safest when she has only had one sexual partner, and of course that should be me. And he says that it's a mine of precious stone. It's a homophone, and it's a pun essentially, mine as in mine, like the pronoun mine, but also mine as in the place to get stones, get precious jewels, to get quarries. So it's again dirty because he elicits those valuable things, but there's also a sense of admiration that she's so valuable that he truly appreciates her. He calls her my empire. He says that he's blessed to have her. To enter in these bonds is to be free. Then where my hand is set, my seal shall be. So to enter in these bonds would be arms. So to hug you is to be free, but it's quite paradoxical because bonds can also be like in the marriage sense. So I am simultaneously free but also not free. I become yours. I enter into a bond with you when I seal my name, when I sign my name on this marriage document, but I also become free and liberated. Again, this probably reference to Platonic ideals and this idea that you're truly free, you're truly yourself, you truly discover the joys and the magic of living when you unite with your other half. And there's also an implication here that he's actually taking this quite seriously, that he's actually willing to marry this woman as long as they actually have this relationship, that he's very committed to her. Full nakedness, O joys, are due to thee, as souls unbodied, bodies unclothed must be, to taste whole joys. Gems which you women use are like Atlantis balls, cast in men's views, that when a fool's eye lighteth on a gem, his earthly soul may covet theirs, not them. Full nakedness, he exclaims, drawing attention to this idea that the best state to be would be the naked state. So yet again, another reference to souls reuniting and to becoming naked before each other, unbodied. So when souls rise to the sky and reunite, so they're no longer confined in their material bodies and their material shells that split them apart. Likewise, bodies unclothed must be. So likewise, we should take our clothes off and join together. And just when we had this whole romantic idea, there's another completely end-stop sentence that we have: to taste whole joys. Yeah, to taste whole joys, whole a homophone, whole as an entire, to taste entire joys, to taste the entirety of the joy of our relationship. And also, you heard that right. Whole as in a whole. For me to taste the joys of this emptiness. Yeah. The full stop is there to make sure that you don't miss this dirty line. The next part is a bit complicated. We finally have the metaphysical conceit. It really is interesting to see how Donne couples the ideas of, well, quite literary crafts, things that require a lot of foresight and a lot of thought with the filthiest thing that you can think of. So, this next part is a story by Ovid about Atlanta, who had sworn that she would only marry the man who could outrun her or win her in a competition. And Hippomenes cheated. He threw some golden apples or balls to distract her, and he won. So the slightly complicated conceit here is that actually there's a gender reversal, and it's the woman with her gems who distracts the man with her balls. Again, it's likely a joke at this expense that there's a reversal of gender roles, and it's not the man who has the balls, it's the woman who has her gems, so it's distracting. So the clean version is, of course, that the gems are just shiny precious stones, and the dirty version is that that the gems are the thing that he's jealous of the corset for being so close to. But interestingly, within this, we also have a deeper message. He's saying that men are fools when a fool's eye lighteth on a gem. He's saying that, well, we men are idiots. We're superficial. We only look at these things in a woman. We only look at her gems, so we only look at her physical appearance. And we don't appreciate her for who she really is, for what's inside. Everyone can look at the outside, but well, what about personality? Like pictures or like books gay coverings made for lay men are all women thus arrayed, themselves are mystic books which only we, whom their imputed grace will dignify, must see revealed, that then since that I may know, as liberally as to a midwife, show thyself, cast all, this white linen hence, there is no penance due to innocence. To teach thee I am naked first, why then, what needst thou have more covering than a man? Like pictures or like books with bright colors for laymen, for average men, for fools, that is, women. So the fool only looks at the exterior, but the true man looks at the interior. Books gay coverings made, gay as in bright colors, so themselves are mystic books. The women themselves are mysterious books that a true man will find the joys of reading only if you get to know what's inside. Get to know what's inside in the sexual sense, of course, it's done, but also get to know in the personal sense. So really, there's this combination of an incredibly serious and an incredibly dirty message at the same time, which only we whom their imputed grace will dignify must see. So imputed grace, it's an idea from Calvinism, this idea that grace is given to Christ by the people. So he's here like by saying that women give their greatest qualities to men, that we get their grace endowed on us, and this bit is separated from the rest to highlight its value and importance. He's saying that most men admire the appearance, but not me. Here are my feminist ideas. Now please admire me and sleep with me. Show you to me as you do to a midwife. A midwife would have been kind of like a gynecologist, so assumingly show to me yourself the way that you would to a gynecologist. Show yourself liberally, in other words, free yourself from your constraints of your clothes, cast away the white linens. The white linens down there, there is no penance due to innocence. So you don't have to defend your honor by wearing white. You don't have to pretend you're innocent with me. I won't punish you for not being innocent. In fact, I positively encourage you to take off your white, to take off your purity, and to liberate yourself from your constraints. The final lines are to teach thee, to show you, I am naked first. I have taken off all of my clothes. Why then, what needs thou have more covering than a man? So the meaning is, how could you defy a man? So it's teasingly, again, referring to the status of men, like, how do you think that you're better than men? But also the reason for that is to say, you're not better than men, so take off your clothes, because, well, I am the man and I am without my clothes. But also, it's double meaning, because it could be saying, what needs thou have more covering than a man? So Is there anything better to be covered with? Any clothes that are better to be covered with than me? But also, interestingly, now that we've had all of this stuff, let's look at the tense. It's in present simple. I am naked first. So we have this idea, we have this image of Donne standing completely naked at the foot of this woman who is completely clothed and essentially trying all of his means to get her to join him. So, really, who has retained their honor in this situation and who has humiliated him? Because so far, Dan has merely been asking for consent and he's already gotten off all of his clothes, but still, it seems the woman hasn't budged. So, we have an interesting challenge to these traditional notions of male authority and women obeying. So, in that regard, I think that this was a very interesting poem to analyze, even if maybe it's probably possibly not ideal to discuss in a class setting. Thank you so much for watching and making it to the end. Thank you for joining me on my John Donne, very apt cover image from Penguin Classics journey, and I will see you next week.